What's up, everybody? We're back in Photoshop today, and in this video, we're going to be discussing brushes and kind of going in depth with brushes, how to install brushes, adjust them, and make them. So first, I've got Photoshop open, and we are just going to create a new blank document, which is taking longer than it normally should. And we're just going to create a 2000 pixel grid. We'll leave our background white, and we'll just call this one brush examples and click on create. Here we go. As I already know, I've got my plain regular brush tool here. There are other tools that have the word brush in them as well that do different things. There's your color replacement tool, which kind of looks like the brush tool, mixer brush tool, and then there's also your history brush and art history brush. All of which act in different ways, but predominantly you're going to spend most of your time with your plain old regular brush tool. The pencil tool is a similar tool that does just kind of hard edges like that, just paints using regular pixels. You can see the brush tool is a little bit more round and modifiable. Okay, so I'm going to make my brush size a little bit bigger. You already know that we can adjust brush settings in our options menu. You can also right-click on your canvas and adjust things like the size or the hardness of your brush, or even pick from default brush presets that are in there. Here we can change the opacity, the flow, the smoothing. One of my favorite things to do is one of the newer things, and it's Photoshop's symmetry brush effect. Watch what happens. I'm going to click on vertical. We're going to adjust this line, make it fit all the way across. Now, if I've got my brush tool selected, we're going to make the brush have a hard edge. If I paint over here, wherever I paint, it will automatically copy to the other side. We'll undo that. Watch. Now, if I change this to wavy, same thing. Wherever I paint here, it paints the same thing on the other side. Going a little bit slow, but that's okay. Let's try mandala. Segment count 10. This is just a fun thing that recently got brought into Photoshop. And we will make this stretch all the way across. Try to make sure that it's in the middle. Close enough. All right. Now, if I paint, wherever I paint, it will automatically add in symmetrical effects to the rest of everything else. I can even change colors. Why is this going so slow? And it will continue to paint in a symmetrical fashion with everything else that I've got. There we go. If you ever want to modify your brush settings, that's one of the panels that you can click on. Panels are all under the Windows menu. Just clicking on the brushes panel pulls up the brushes that already exist, but if you actually want to adjust the settings of your brush, you have to go into brush settings, which is a different panel. Window brush settings will pull that up. If you find that you use that a lot, you could drag it somewhere and dock it somewhere in your workspace so that you could access it quickly. So right now we've got brush settings right there. I'm going to click blank layer. So yeah, check this out. We'll go to our brush tool, and if I click on this, we have all of these different little things that we can toggle on and off. We're going to toggle on shape dynamics. At the bottom of the panel, it gives you a little preview of your brush, what it would look like from the beginning to the end. So these are all different ways you can modify the way that your brush looks and the way that your brush works. Let's turn on scattering and pull up the scatter, and you can see how it moves everything apart. Count adds more, count jitter kind of changes it depending on where you're going. Let's go back to shape dynamics. There we go. Now we can really kind of see what we're doing. We can change the angle of it, which is not going to really matter because we've got a circle. Now you can see if I click and drag, it just kind of spreads everything out. Check this one out. We're going to click on color dynamics. What this does is it goes back and forth between your foreground color and your background color, which right now it's just black and white, so this should just be shades of gray. But if we actually make this a more interesting color combination, let's do red, maybe yellow, see. Yeah, you can kind of see if we zoom in there that it's doing all those different reds and yellows. Let's make this larger. And let's get two colors that are a little bit further apart. Let's do blue and yellow. And it's just jumping back and forth between these two. And if I drag foreground background color jitter up higher, you can see that it's getting a little bit more yellow in there. Let's drag hue jitter, saturation jitter, and brightness jitter up. Oh yeah, now we're getting somewhere. It looks kind of like, I don't know, sprinkles or something like that. We will get rid of that layer, make another blank layer. So there's lots of ways that you can modify your brush and how it works. We'll turn color dynamics off. You can combine two brushes together using the dual brush settings, which can modify the blending mode that it uses as well. You can add texture to your brush. You can just do all sorts of fun stuff. Wet edges, and it'll always preview down here. Build-up effects, and most of them you can click on it and adjust by clicking and dragging on your settings over here. So yeah, we've got some fairly interesting brush settings going on right now that we can utilize. But there is also an ability, if you would like, let's actually just go to regular Google, to import new brushes into Photoshop. So you can just search things like Photoshop brushes, or there's websites like Brush Easy, which is spelled like Brush Easy. Let's search leaf brushes. And if you find one that you like, sometimes you have to scroll down a little bit. Always important to make sure you're getting the right thing. Let's go to these. Free download. We'll wait again, waiting patiently. And hopefully this one will be an actual brush file. And it's just that, .abr. So I double click the file, and now I'm back in Photoshop. I'm just going to pull up my brushes. And if we scroll down to the bottom, you see fall leaves, that's right here. And here are my leaves. It's previewing it over here for me in my brush settings. So let's click on this one. We'll click, that leaf is a little big. Let's actually make our canvas size a little bit bigger. Let's say 200%. And if we want the brush to be smaller as well, all you have to do is just adjust the size. And then you can click and you can see your brush. If we didn't like that one, we could change the color. Let's go to this green. Make it a little bit bigger. And you can see that you've got your brush right there. Now keep in mind that you can modify that. We could go over here to brush tip shape. We could make it bigger or smaller. We could flip it if we wanted to, up and down or side to side. Or we can use this crosshair to rotate the brush. We could adjust the spacing. That's for when you click and drag, how often it will place down a new one. Or we could scatter it like we've already talked about. We can add color dynamics like we've already talked about. All sorts of stuff. Let's zoom out, make this a little bit smaller, get a blank layer. Let's go between that dark green and maybe this kind of burnt orange. Now if I click and drag, it just adds those leaves. I would like for this to rotate it as well. That's probably shape dynamics, size jitter, angle jitter, and there we go. So now when I click and drag, it's just putting on tons of different leaves wherever I click and drag, jumping between the colors, turning the angle of them, doing all sorts of fun different stuff. People will add leaves to trees. You can add grass. You can use this same thing. There's eyebrow brushes in Photoshop where you can adjust people's eyebrows or do their makeup for them. Just depends on what you're actually doing. By the way, there's other brushes that are in Photoshop as well. You just kind of scroll down and look at them. There's a whole bunch. I might have some installed that I've used that you might not. Here's these watercolor ones. Certain brushes require different tools to be used in Photoshop. Let's see. Yeah, we've got some interesting looking brushes on there. So you can just scroll through the ones you see. If you see one that you like, you can click on it, and then you can definitely use it. So there's a little Polaroid defect brush that I was making. If I wanted to actually flip it a different way, let's make it that big. Let's make it black. Let's open up a picture. Let's see. We'll drag and drop this one into Photoshop. We'll move him. I added him to the same document. That's okay. Go to my brush. Won't let us use it on that one because it is a smart object. But now we could just kind of add in this little Polaroid effect onto our file if we wanted. Doesn't look right because it's not a Polaroid, but that is how that brush works. Of course, you can take images that already exist and turn them into brushes as well. So for example, I'm going to pull up Google Images, and I'm going to search, let's see, let's search brush stroke. Let's say we like something like this. I kind of like the, no, that one's that. Let's change our size to large and our usage rights to available for reuse. We're looking for a realistic brush stroke. Really not seeing too much there. Let's get rid of this. Not filtered by license. We're going to change it substantially, so that'll be okay. Maybe this one. Okay. Let me just search. Let's say that we like this. I'm going to copy this, go back to Photoshop, click Create New, make sure Clipboard is selected once our new document dialog box pops open. Sorry that my computer's being so slow today. Clipboard will make sure it automatically adjusts to the dimensions of whatever you have copied. What I'm going to do is I want to get a selection of the brush stroke. So first, I'm going to go to my Magic Wand tool, uncheck Contiguous, and just click on the black. The higher your tolerance, the more it's going to select. Let's try changing that from 40 to 50. Click on it. Probably did a pretty good job. And now, if I go to Edit and then click on the Define Brush Preset button, we can see that it's making this a brush. So we can call this Circular Brush Stroke and say OK. So if I were to go on top of an image, like let's drag an image on there. Let's say Open with Photoshop. Can make our brush a little bit larger. See how big we can make it. That looks pretty good. And we could utilize that brush. Now we are not limited to the color that we originally made it with. It was black originally, but if we wanted to make that white, we could go make it white. I'll change my color to white, click, and now we have a white version of that brush. It's not fully opaque, but I could click multiple times to make it that way. And then we could modify it the same way we modified everything else. Let's make one more brush. Let's just search for a picture of a dog. Usage rights, labeled for reuse. We're definitely going with this puppy. It's on Pexels, which is a public domain website. We'll talk about that here soon. I'm going to open this into Photoshop. We'll wait patiently. All right, so this one I'm going to get a selection of this puppy just by clicking and dragging with the quick selection tool. Probably just the face is all we really need. If I wanted to modify it, I could zoom in and fine-tune my selection. Not sure I want to spend too much time doing that right now. I'm holding the Alt or Option key, but you could adjust it however you would like. Now I'm switching to lasso, holding Shift to add to, holding Alt to remove. Good idea would always be to go to the select and mask dialog box to perfect your selection if you would like, but since the fact that we're just going to be turning this into a brush anyway, brushes aren't 100% perfect, so I'm not too worried about it. All right, so we've got our selection. If I want to turn my selection into a brush, that once again is just Edit, Define Brush Preset, and we can call this one Puppy. So we'll close that out, go back to this one. Let's get rid of me. Let's add in a solid color black background. Put our brush layer on top. Add another blank layer, go to our puppy brush. By the way, if we didn't have our puppy brush, we would just right click or go to window brushes and you can choose them. At the bottom are the ones that I just made. There's puppy and there's a circular brush stroke. Let's make the puppy red. We'll go to red right here. Click right in the middle, and that is absolutely terrifying. Did not mean to make that happen. We can invert it and it's still terrifying. There's our red puppy in a circle. And if we clicked and dragged, we could have tons of red puppies there, or we can click it all over the place and just add puppy after puppy after puppy. So yes, we talked about Photoshop brushes. We discussed the regular brush tool here. We talked about how you can adjust it with the options bar. You can also adjust it with brush settings. You can add brushes into Photoshop from external locations. Those are .abr files. And then we also discussed that you can create your own brushes. By the way, if I wanted to export any of those brushes, window brushes, select the brushes you want, and then you can say, hit the little fly up button and say, save brushes, export selected brushes. There it is. And that's how you could get them out. If you just want some from Adobe, you can hit that fly up button and click on get more brushes. And there are other brushes that Adobe has that you can download online if you would like to. One more thing, and then we'll call this video. One of the newer features in Photoshop is the mixer brush tool. I'll show you how this works. It's kind of fun, a little bit interesting. I'm going to put a little bit of red right there. Now I'm going to change my color that I'm painting with to yellow. And watch what happens. If I have the mixer brush tool, normally just painting yellow, but if I start and go into the red, you can see that it starts to change. We're now painting with orange. If I were to switch this to blue, let's get a really big blue. It paints by blue on itself, but with the mixer brush tool, if I go into another color, it starts to mix the two colors, or three colors, or four colors together. So that's kind of a fun tool that you can use to get interesting looking effects on pictures. Let's see. Oh, I actually already have that open. So I can paint and it kind of just mixes everything up if you would like to. Not the most useful thing, but it is fun that it actually exists, and you can adjust all the settings for that tool as well. So that was our video about using brushes in Photoshop. That's it for now. We'll talk about compositing next.